The rain had been falling since morning, steady and cold, soaking through the thin fabric of her faded dress as she stood in front of the small wooden cabin, her eyes fixed on the horizon as though her gaze alone could summon back the man who had promised her forever but had vanished without a trace. Her husband had left weeks ago, chasing money, freedom, or another woman she didn't know anymore, and though her heart told her he wasn't coming back, a stubborn flicker of hope kept her rooted to that spot, waiting, shivering, whispering prayers that dissolved into the storm. Her hair clung wet to her cheeks, her lips trembled from more than the chill, and the weight of abandonment pressed heavy on her chest, when suddenly the sound of hooves cut through the thunder. She turned, half expecting to see the man she had once loved, but instead there rode a stranger, a cowboy tall in the saddle, rain dripping off the brim of his black hat, his horse's muscles gleaming in the stormlight, and lightning splitting the sky behind him. Like God himself had announced his arrival, he didn't ride past like others had, didn't avert his eyes or toss pity her way. He slowed, reined his horse, and looked directly at her as if he had been searching for her all his life. Their eyes met, and though he was a stranger, there was something steady, something unmovable in him that made her trembling ease. He asked no questions about the man who had left her, spoke no empty words to soften her hurt. Instead, he dismounted, tied his horse, and without hesitation draped his worn leather coat across her shoulders, shielding her from the storm as though she were the only soul that mattered in this vast, cruel world. She wanted to tell him to leave, to remind herself not to trust another man, but her voice broke in the weight of his quiet presence. The storm raged harder, rain running in rivulets through the muddy ground, but he simply stood beside her, eyes fixed on the same horizon she had been watching for weeks, as if silently promising her that he, unlike the one before, would never ride away. And in that silence, something began to shift inside her. Pain did not vanish, but hope took on a new shape, no longer tethered to the man who had betrayed her, but tied instead to the cowboy who had appeared. When her heart was breaking, she realized then that sometimes God closes one door by storm and lightning only to open another through a man who refuses to leave your side. She didn't know his name, nor what twist of fate had led him to her cabin in the pouring rain, but she knew her story wasn't ending here in sorrow. It was only beginning, under the thunder, with a cowboy whose presence felt like a promise. And so, for the first time in weeks, she smiled through the rain, not because her husband was returning, but because a stranger had come, who would not let her stand alone anymore. The storm did not end quickly, but neither did he leave, and that truth alone began to warm her in ways the coat on her shoulders could not. The rain hammered against the roof of the cabin, and lightning split the horizon again, but the cowboy stayed, his horse tethered nearby, his presence steady as the earth itself. For days, she had lived in silence, with only the echo of abandonment in her ears. Yet now there was a new sound, the crackle of fire he built inside her cabin, the rhythm of his boots on the wooden floor as he moved with quiet purpose, and the steady baritone of his voice as he spoke, not of himself but of the strength he saw in her, reminding her that she was more than a woman left behind. She tried to resist at first, her heart scarred by betrayal, but the way he carried himself, firm yet gentle, protective without chains, began to unravel the walls she had built. He helped mend the fences outside, repaired the roof where water had leaked through, and when she asked why he was doing so much for a woman he didn't know, his answer was simple, spoken with eyes that held storms of their own. Because no one deserves to be left standing in the rain. Those words pierced deeper than the betrayal ever had, not because they were sweet, but because they were true, and she felt them with every fiber of her being. Slowly, laughter returned to her lips, soft and uncertain at first, then stronger, echoing against the empty fields like a song she had forgotten she could sing. The ghost of her husband's memory began to fade, not erased by force, but dissolved gently by the presence of a man who did not demand her heart, but simply stood guard over it until she was ready to give it again. Weeks passed, and with each sunset painted across the sky, she realized her waiting was over, not for the man who had abandoned her, but for the one who had arrived when she had nothing left to give. The cowboy was no longer a stranger. He was the one who planted himself in her life like roots in rich soil, unshaken by storm or sorrow. And so one morning, when the sun broke through clear skies after endless rain, She no longer looked to the horizon for a shadow of her past. Instead, she looked at the man saddling his horse by the barn, ready to ride out to mend the land. And her heart swelled with a truth that could not be denied. He had not come to leave. He had come to stay. Love had found her again, not in the promises of a husband who had betrayed her, but in the actions of a cowboy who proved that real devotion is shown not by words spoken, but by the choice to never walk away. And in that moment, she knew her story did not end in heartbreak, but in the kind of love that storms could not wash away. If this ending touched your soul, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable cowboy love stories that remind us, sometimes, the right one rides in just when we think all hope is gone.